back to Minds Matter, a podcast sponsored by the Monash Centre for Consciousness and Contemplative Studies. I'm Beth.
And I'm Ava. And on Minds Matter, we explore research from neuroscience to psychology while occasionally talking through our own personal experiences.
Welcome to season 4. I can't believe we're at season 4. It's pretty cool. And some of the episodes this season I've recorded in a new space. So you'll notice like better sound and video and stuff. And this first episode is actually a really special episode because we talked to Andrew Gray, and Andrew is the reason I'm in this space. He is the co-founder of CoLabs, which is a co-working lab space. So it's this place where different labs come and work out their research. Their projects are around things to help the world. And we talked to Andrew a bit about that, but the main thing we speak to him about is his other thing he's involved in, which is BioQuisitive. And BioQuisitive is a civic science hub. So it's a lab basically anyone in the community can use. He explains how that all works. And it's super inspiring. He's definitely changed my life, and being involved in this community has been amazing. And we really hope you guys can listen to this episode and maybe feel inspired to get involved in similar projects and communities happening where you are, maybe even start your own communities. Andrew's very inspiring when it comes to that. And yeah, hear about some of the amazing stuff that they're doing and ways we can stop all this wastage in science. And it's just really positive. And yeah, I hope you guys like it.
My background, like how I got into everything that I'm doing now, and I can go way back, but I guess to that point, I left the military. I'm from California originally, so I was born in the Bay Area, Shriners Hospital in Oakland, then moved around Marin County, and parents eventually split up. So my mom got remarried after my parents split up to a Tasmanian winemaker. So I moved from Novato, up near Sacramento in California, to Tasmania, and lived on a vineyard down there for about 4 years called Ninth Island. I don't know anything about wine, and I feel like that was a failed opportunity to become like a really good wine snob. Yeah, 100%. Anyway, after doing I think 4 years there, I was like convinced I wanted to go to the US, and I was missing out big time. And like, I wanted to go back to the US so badly. My dad was there. And so I did what I thought I needed to do to be able to get into the US education system, which is the SATs. I think I did okay. I didn't do amazing, but it was like somewhere between 13 and 1400 on the SATs. And I was like, great, done my VCEs here, or which is like,
that's like our final year of high school in Australia.
So I had my grades here, did the SATs. I'm like, I'll go apply and get into a university over there or college. And as soon as I went in, everybody was like, oh, whoa, you're coming in from Australia? What kind of math and English do they even do down there? And I was like, you're going to have to do 3 years of junior college before we let you anywhere near our universities. I'm like, what? Yeah. Anyway, so that was my experience there. So I worked at a pizzeria, and it was which was heaven to me because I love pizza. And pizza. One of those, they like, oh, hey, never, if you work at your dream food place, you'll become sick of that food.
No.
Nope.
Yeah,
I was in heaven. Oh God, yeah. But I decided to join the Navy. I think it was my dad's secret plan the whole time because he was ex-military. My grandfather was ex-military. And so when I told my dad my predicament, he just calmly opened this drawer and pulled out all these Navy pamphlets. He's like, oh, that's interesting you say that. Here's have a look at these. So, it was all planned, He's like, yes. So I was in the Navy for a while. And I thought, all right, well, that'll give me some time and I'll be able to leave and then have some support to go to school wherever I want, or, go back to the US. I won't have to go through this whole thing again. And then when I was in the military, it was a very interesting experience. I did 4 years in Japan, and then I did 1 year in Afghanistan. And then when I was doing my year in Afghanistan, I was on a base, and then the base basically got snowed in, so we couldn't leave. It had internet. So I started thinking, oh, well, I'll just do an associate's degree there.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm in Afghanistan doing an elective in biology, and I just got obsessed with biology in Afghanistan. And I'm like, this is so cool. I didn't want to do. And it also made me just realize how the military was not for me at all. I'm trying to talk to people about like DNA in the military, and they're like, yeah, dude, just go clean the vehicles, and you can tell us about, they're just not very, they just didn't care about it at all. But also just I'd grown out of it, and like being in Afghanistan, you just really makes you question your decisions and like, who am I? It's a really deep question. So I decided to leave, got out. I was done with the US. I actually felt terrified when I went back to the US. Yeah, I just didn't feel the same. Because I think about 8 years now since I'd left, lived in Australia, came back, or got out of the military, and it just wasn't home to me anymore. So came to Australia, used my VCE, or I thought I was going to use my GI Bill from the military and my VCEs to get into uni. And it was not that easy at all. It was like, oh, wait, you want to study now and you're like 26? Your grades have expired. They literally told me my grades expired.
Wow.
I'm like, what do you mean they expired? Like the paper's right here. There's no expiry date on this. What are you talking about? And so I was like, well, what can I do? And basically I had to do what they told me to do in the US, which was I had to repeat year 11 and 12 high school biology and chemistry. And I'm just
Even
like,
though you had an associate's degree at that point?
I had some credits, but I hadn't finished it. So
Oh
I'd
my
started it.
gosh.
Yeah. So I had some credits I could use, but
So have you done like three different year 12s?
4 technically. I'm not even joking. I
Wow.
repeated it 4 times. I think once in Tassie, I did it again to try and get better VC. I did a year 13 is what they call it. Because I just messed around so much in my year 12. And I'm like, oh, I'll just see if I can boost my grades up. Didn't work. I still messed around. So.
So you have the basics down.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I have the memory. It's like in my DNA. Yeah. So anyway, I was like, okay, I'll just do year 11 and 12 all over again. Sure. Did it, got into Deakin University, and I was stoked. I was over the moon. I was like the annoying old guy in the lecture room going like, what about apoptosis? He's like, yes, we'll get to that next week, Andrew. And anyway, I got into year 2 and I was really having a good time. As a mature age student, I made a lot of friends with all of the demonstrators who, were about my age. So we're, playing basketball, and they were introducing me to other lab mates and all their friends that were working in other big labs. There was like people working in malaria labs and other like synthetic biology labs, biomaterials. Like I was obsessed. I was showing up to the game with papers to talk to people about. I was like such a nerd. And anyway, year 12, my second year was coming around, and I was studying for my exams. And I got this is, I think, 2012. And I got this email from Deakin, or it was a letter, sorry, from Deakin saying, hey, just a heads up, you can't sit your exams next week. And I'm like, what's going on? I was like, well, yeah, you owe us $10,000. And I'm like,
What?
no, the GI Bill pays for that. And they're like, well, they didn't. So I called up the office, the VA's office. This was during the government shutdown in 2012. So there was like this delay in comms. So Deakin didn't know. And and this is, I guess, my first exposure to how machine-like these universities and institutions are, where it's like the cogs turn and they don't rewind. Like if the cog turns past, it's really hard to find an exception or even like level with someone and go like, please, like I've been studying for 3 weeks for these exams, or next week, can I just sit the exam and then like go on a payment plan? It's like, I'm sorry, to be on a payment plan, you've had to apply for that payment plan 2 weeks ago and you just missed the cutoff. And I'm like, but surely I can just do the payment plan now, right? Like this is a weird circumstance, and they're like, I'm really sorry, but like, you can just start up again next year. And I'm like, ah. So really deflated. I grabbed my transcripts and I was like, okay, I'll come back next year. And took my transcripts and then decided not to come back because I didn't want to pay them I didn't have $10,000 cash. I instead started to apply to new degrees. I figured, well, look, I've got grades now. I've got marks. I can use that to transfer to another school. So I applied to a whole bunch of different universities, University of Melbourne, just basic science stuff. And I got into, and like on a whim, I applied to this one at Monash. It was like this new program that had started called, it was like the bachelor's, it was an advanced science degree, global challenges. And it was like, there's no way I'll get this, but it sounded really cool. And I got it. It was the only one I got offered was that one. So none of the other universities, RMIT, La Trobe, Deakin, definitely not. But yeah, no one else wanted me except for this one program. And the only thing that got me into that program was the fact that I was older, had been in the military, had like this weird run-in like systemically with all these, challenges trying to get through my degree in my life at the time. So I got in on that and then found out there was a catch, which was I couldn't use my grades to fast forward. So I couldn't, because it was year one. There was no cohort. There was no year two to go to. So I had to repeat everything, like molecular biology 1011. And at this point, I'm just like, I'm just going to build my own lab. This is so stupid. Like, why is this taking so long? And I went and spoke to all my lecturers, and they're like, you're crazy. Don't build a lab. Just get through your degree, and then you can come work in my lab. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to build a lab, dude. So I went on Reddit, and you can still see the Reddit post today.
Oh my God,
Like,
we'll have to link
yeah,
it
yeah.
in our show notes.
It's pretty embarrassing. I'm literally like by myself commenting on my own thread in Reddit going like, hey, update, update, update. And so I literally I was like, hey, who wants to build a lab? Like a legit lab, not, nothing dodgy. And everybody, there was actually quite a bit of support. And so we started this meetup group. We're catching up just at the Elizabeth Street roundabout. There used to be a backpacker's place that I used to live at. And so we were having meetings at the bar talking about like this lab, and we incorporated an association and literally, yeah, built a lab. We ran like a Psytrance rave to fund the lab. We were selling sausages at Bunnings, and like Bunnings is like
yes.
Home Depot. So imagine being out Home Depot with like a grill and going like wearing a lab coat, going like, buy sausage for science. So literally
Hold on. So you didn't have your undergrad degree yet, but you were like, I need to
well,
have a lab and like be the PI.
technically I had
Like
more
5
years
degrees.
than most undergrads at that point, my degrees. So
But you knew, like, what did you mean by a lab? Like, you knew exactly what you wanted to research,
yeah,
or
well, I'm in life science, so biology, molecular biology, DNA work, bacteria work. I was just obsessed with like microbes, DNA, plants, anything that was living, but not like macro, more micro. Microscopy. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just remembering when I had a microscope on my desk, and I would just come home and like put dirty like gutter water onto slides and just stare at like all the life swimming around, and like, yeah, it was so much fun. But yeah, so it's actually like if I asked you, Ava, how would you start a lab? What like, and if you didn't know anything, what's probably the first thing you would do?
get a job?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, fair. I just Googled how to build a lab, and then it was kind of like this snowball of like you get introduced to all these building standards, regulations, and I mean
So
for
the
me,
physical space too. You were like, I need to like. It wasn't I need to build intellectual community. It was I'm building a physical
well,
brick and
I
mortar
wanted the
lab.
community and I wanted the lab. The community because there was no way I was going to do this alone. Because doing something like that, I always wanted to do it around people that were like-minded. And then the physical space, yes, because I kept on running into this challenge around accessibility. Like, how do you access, the thing that it is that you're after? In my case, I believe that it was a lab because if I had access to the lab, at this point, I knew how to read a research paper. I knew that I could repeat and learn from the research paper. You just extract the methods, look at the materials. The challenge, obviously, is science is a pay to play kind of thing. So, well, I thought that was the challenge until I came across how much waste there is in the science ecosystem here. I think every university internationally probably has that place where things kind of end up before they get thrown out. And so I became very familiar with where those places were at university to the point like I would show up in my little hatchback and be like rummaging through the clinical waste section for the incubator I thought I saw earlier, and then like loading that at night into the the trunk of the car and then drive off. I got caught once, and it actually was really beneficial. It was good. It was really uh, great thing. So the lady that caught me was the building manager, and she's like, what are you doing?" Yeah. I explained everything. She's like, "Oh, that's great. I'll just get just what's your email address? I'll just let you know when we're throwing things out." And then that led to us, yeah, just this constant flow of equipment. And it's just crazy how much stuff gets thrown out. Like labs, it's just the nature of academia. If you need to get funds, you need to get grants. If you don't use the grants, you lose the grants. And so people tend to just replace everything they can in the lab. So like if it's a centrifuge, it's like, well, the centrifuge works, but we could get the refrigerated version of the centrifuge. And so now they throw out the old version and they have this fancy new one, but that old one works. But going back, I guess, to like the progression, yeah, we basically Googled how to build a lab. I believed if we had the lab, we could take control of our education and like actually learn the things that we wanted to. One of the challenges with universities, often you'll get in and then like you get to the end of your degree and they come out with this really amazing degree and you're like, oh, damn, I wish that actually sounds really cool. I wish I could have learned that. And so having a lab, like you're literally in control of as long as you can pay and get the reagents, you're in control of your own education, which is really cool. Your own curiosity and discovery. So yeah, it started off as like this dingy. The first lab was really because we had a lot of people from the Burning Man community, like burners in the group. So it was very steampunk. So we had like porthole windows, corrugated iron walls. The doors, the entry to the lab were two doors off a filing cabinet. So it was it was so ghetto. But it worked, and like we put so much silicon in that place to make sure it was airtight, and like it was built to spec, like to the regulations, to the point when we invited the Department of Health, because a big value that our community was trying to support, in addition to accessibility, was transparency and do no harm. So we really wanted, all the regulators to be aware of who we were, what we're doing, and they were like, "You want us to come inspect your lab?" Because generally, I think people look at the OH&S, and biosafety people as like just hide them away from what's happening in the lab because they're gonna. But we wanted that there because we knew for us it was going to ensure the longevity of the initiative if they were on side. We made friends there, and like to date, still supported heavily by people that knew me from the tie-dyed lab coat selling sausage science for science days. So it's
Because I know a bit more about this because Andrew's one of my best friends. Because I could see maybe the first time you hear this, it's like, whoa, it's so different to what we know. Do you have any questions that would make it clearer what's going on? Or
so there's examples of this in the US. It was actually the US is where this movement kicked off. So the movement itself that has gone under many different names. Are you familiar with MIT Media Lab at all?
Hmm.
Yeah. So MIT Media Lab's kind of similar. It's a community science lab, DIY biospace. Biohacker space was what they used to be called until biohacking became more about bulletproof coffee and like nootropics and supplementation and stuff. We're just calling it a community lab here, or Civic Science Hub is the new word we're using because it seems to strike a chord with government. But in the Bay Area, for example, there's counterculture labs, there's BioQuisitive. Definitely check out counterculture labs if you're in the Bay Area, because that's kind of a really good example of and that place has been running forever. On the East Coast, there's Gen Space, there's a few of these other kind of locations, and they just exist to make science more accessible, to democratize access to science effectively.
I guess when you say democratize access to science, do you mean, because I know Beth has told me a little bit about some of the like civic science stuff where you bring people in from the community to like show them how things work and maybe do experiments if they wanted to, but is there like structure in the way that it works? Is it that
Oh, yeah.
there's specific research questions that you want to answer? Is it more about the education aspect that you mentioned? Like, I want to figure this out for myself. So more education, or is it also like there are specific programs of research that we want to do and the goal is then to bring more people into the community and kind of open it up to people who are outside of the traditional structures of academia? It's just like so different from what I
No,
know. And like, I
literally,
mean, like I
yeah.
said if I had to start a lab, I would get a job because it's never occurred to me that I could do that without um having a structure and like people telling me how to do it. I would never be like how to make a lab and then do that. Like I don't have that maverick spirit at all. So
I think it's just called naivety. Yeah. That's not a bad thing. I think, yeah, like, and I was very lucky because there was people like you that would pull me up and question things every now and then, because if you're just saying like everything's possible, you end up with some really janky and sometimes dangerous bits of equipment. Like I remember building a centrifuge, not recommended
mm.
anyway, but we'll get to that later. It was out of a Dremel. It was pretty fun. But to your question of like how what's the structure like? So it's incorporated as a charity. So I mean, like at the most of them are charity or not for profits. So there generally is like a governing document, like a constitution. So, but that's more around the governance of the initiative internally and how they operate. Very different. When we started, like I didn't know what I was doing. Like we're literally, it was like spaghetti tower, like you're just building it as it goes and like, oh, this isn't working. Let's put that there. And we just thought people would show up and see the lab and see what we saw and go like, cool, like let me jump in here and start doing science. And people were attracted to it because it was so far-fetched from anything that they'd ever seen before. But once they got there, like, well, what do we do? And like, we're like, oh shit, well, we haven't thought about that. So that's when we started doing projects. We started running like just basic things. And in fact, things that we were learning about at university, we were doing at the lab. So like, learning how to do, I was really interested in genetic engineering at the time. So I was just honing my transformation, my cloning, these are all techniques used in molecular biology for moving and shifting DNA. So projects. But also education. So we were running workshops because we needed to fund the lab. Like you have rent, and so this was
Okay,
also
that's
kind of,
what I wanted to ask. It's
yeah.
like where's the money coming?
Yeah. So when we got started, the money was coming from fundraisers. So selling sausages, running Psytrance raves.
Psytrance raves. It all makes sense.
Yes. But so that gave us the funding to buy like our initial reagents and stuff. So the projects we were doing were either personal projects. So people would come in with personal interests, like maybe in fungi. Fungi's a massive one here. So we have a whole sub community that spun out of our community called Myco community or my community. And their whole thing is like everything from, using DNA to identify the taxonomy of native fungi that have been misclassified because early colonialists just basically came to Australia and they were like, oh, that looks like a this, we'll call it that. But there was actually no like true understanding. So they're actually doing work like that now. Environmental conservation. In fact, most of the projects that we did were actually centered around environmental conservation. When we did a really cool project, a collaboration with MIT Media Lab, where they wanted to work with beekeepers in Australia to see for, I don't know why Australia specifically, but they wanted to use the bees as like pollution detecting biosensors. So they created like a bee toilet that sits at the bottom of the beehive, and then they would sequence what's on the poop and see what's in there, and basically, be able to see what's in the air. So they're using bees to now sort of monitor air quality, air health, and stuff like that. Later on, we did a really big project with another charity called Science for All. Good friend Jack Nunn that runs that. And they got some funding to monitor critically endangered species here called the leadbeater possum. So this possum is basically critically endangered because it lives in like the oldest trees in Australia in the old growth forests that were just getting logged like just a lot. And so these things are really hard to see because they live, 60 meters up in the air. So really high up. They're really tiny. They're about the size of my fist.
They're way more cuter than American possums.
Oh yeah.
Just
yeah.
for people.
They look like chinchillas.
Yeah.
Cute.
So they're really cute, but they're thinner and they have like bigger eyes and they're really cute. And they sit up, but they only come out at night. And so it's really easy for people to go out through the day and say like, oh, I don't see any possums out here. Let's just cut this tree down. So we came up with this. We developed a new environmental DNA technique to isolate their DNA from the poop and soil. So when they poop and pee during the day, we could go around and like collect dirt from around the trees. That was the idea, at least. But yeah, we actually validated the workflow and we worked with researchers. So we were actually working, collaborating with other institutions locally, internationally. Cornell University, we participated in the MetaSub project, which is a metagenomics project looking at how bacteria ride humans riding public transport. Very, very meta. And it was basically to help us prepare for like, if there are going to be antibiotic resistant markers and genes coming into the microbiome of a city, how is that going to flow and how is that going to be impacted by public transport? So a lot of big projects. Those projects really attracted community members. They would all flock in, and then once some people would just stay for the duration of the projects. And it wasn't just science people. We had lawyers, we had yoga instructors, we had locksmiths, like not just kids. We had like people like in their 80s showing up in their walking assistant devices. And John was one of the guys named. He would always show up with like snacks.
Oh,
Just always show up with snacks. And like one day when I told him we needed to do some caulking, like we needed silicon, he showed up with, you could see in his eyes, he's like, this is why I've hoarded all my life. And so he's like showing up with these big boxes of like silicon. I'm like, that's a lot of silicon. We just needed to do this thing. He's like, hey, you never know when you need it though. You never know. Yeah. So yeah, it was, and then what we realized after years now of running this, looking back, is that there was actually really tangible and meaningful outcomes of the people that had participated in this community. A lot of students that had come in early on had used those experiences. There was one girl who isolated plastic degrading bacteria from the fuel cap of her car. And so we're like, oh, wow, we didn't even know that there were bacteria that could break down plastic. And of course, when you think about it, like these bacteria are living in a petroleum environment. Plastics are petroleum based. So, but she isolated one and that got her into a PhD over in the UK. So that was like, and it also pointed out all the challenges. We had a lot of academics coming to us, a lot of people in their postdocs, master's level going like, and we were just like, surely you have better labs than this. And they're like, well, we can't access them, or, my lab doesn't want to train me up in this because I've been brought on to do this very specific thing. We started to come into contact frequently with some of the challenges and the hurdles of the traditional systems that, we study through. Yeah.
Ava, do you have any?
I have a
It's
lot
like
of questions.
mind-blowing, right?
I have a lot of questions. Wait, first, so did someone find a bacteria that breaks down plastic that we didn't know existed and we didn't know that existed at all?
No, it's related. So I shouldn't say the bacteria, it's a gene. So the gene that's in this bacteria. So the bacteria is a common bacteria, Pseudomonas, I can't remember the last name, but it lives in that environment around petroleum-based stuff. But what she found was that it's called a cutinase, which is a type of protein which literally, as it sounds, cuts not plastic, but cuts petroleum, these bonds there that hadn't been described in that way. So it's not that like the bacteria was brand new species of bacteria. It was that this gene was like I think the term is a theoretical protein. So basically you get a match and it's like, this could be a protein, and because it looks like these cutinases, but it hasn't been described before. And it's like, oh, cool. And that could be just because the bacteria, has evolved or, modified the gene over time to do what it needs to do better. But yeah, so.
It sounds extremely useful.
Yeah. Right.
Like, even my non-biology brain, I feel like there's a lot of use cases for that. I guess, like, my biggest question, well, I have a lot, but one question is, it sounds amazing, obviously. And as you're saying, a lot of people are coming to you with wanting to be trained and wanting to work with you. And how do you choose projects and people if, so many opportunities seem to be presenting themselves and there seem to be so many directions? Is that something that you think about, that you feel like you need to be really intentional about? Or is it sounds so organic, but I don't know what it really is
It
kind of behind the
was, but
scenes.
now like an organic can be very hectic. Organic generally means like it's a huge time sink because
Yeah.
we didn't have as much structure as we do now. And so as it sounds, like basically my life was dedicated to this because it was just so addictive. So during the daytime, my day job was I worked at the casino as a special effects officer. So we have this casino here that has these giant towers, and they shoot fire into the air.
That's what you did.
I sat in a room. It was like the first season of Lost when that thing beeps up on the screen, and then I slide over on my wheelie chair and I go beep, and then it sets off
What?
this show. And like I would do that on the hour every hour, and so that was like what I did to
Wow.
survive. And then I would spend the money I got from there on like I would go to the local pharmacy and buy like you look at the ingredients because we still couldn't afford really expensive stuff from the suppliers, like the biotech reagent suppliers. So you're looking for like there's one really great example that one of our members found was in a laxative, it's the same ingredient except it's only 99.99% pure as this pure reagent used for genetic engineering.
Hmm.
And the laxative's like 90 cents for 100 grams and the other reagent's like $500 for, so it's like anyway. But sorry, the now with the structure, what it looks like is we know roughly who the demographics are. We know why they're coming. We know it's for the students, it's that experience. It's that, it's they for them initially it's the experience, but I think really what they're leaving with is networks and contacts and
Hmm.
also agency around and confidence in like what they're doing. And confidence around failure is a big one. So a lot of them don't realize that though until they leave and go on in life. And people are like, oh, I would have never thought to keep doing blah. I was like, well, duh, like, it didn't work, so we have to do the next thing. But like initially when people come into the lab and things don't work, it can be very disheartening. So we know that for a lot of people, it's personal growth, it's education, it's a reference, so some of them need that extracurricular thing so they can go and get some sort of career outcome. And then for others, it's literally skilling up. It's just the skills that they want to learn because they want to go back to their lab and then maybe do those skills or they're considering the other hard thing is like if you in a PhD or something and you've gone down that road and you're suddenly like I would love to do mammalian cell culture. Like it's really hard to get into a lab if you don't have
Yeah.
that linear progression into that specific thing. Jumping out into something else can be quite tricky. So we found that we're helping a lot of those people out. We know that so what we do is we have our workshops, but we also have our projects. So workshops, projects, and then what we have is member nights, which Beth has been helping us out with, just getting the momentum on, which is super, super helpful. So thank you for that. But those are the kind of the three main activities uh, that kind of keep the space afloat. And then like in addition to that, there's grants and stuff. Now we want to go for grants, especially in the education space. I see a lot of potential in this positively impacting outcomes for kids early on. So coming in and like just having as much exposure to science and all the different things you can do in science outside of their traditional classrooms, that might be in a more fun and inviting environment. And then also we're helping other not-for-profits that need access to science infrastructure.
And when you're deciding on the projects, am I right in assuming that it's usually I guess it's like self-selected because people who are coming to the space I feel do care about the same issues, but it's usually things to help the world, right? Is
Yeah,
that
no, 100%. I mean,
like,
like projects, when it's like, oh, what do you want to study? People, it's really bizarre because when you go to like when you go into a supervisor's lab, like it's very laser focused generally what you want to do. And so it's like, I want to modify this enzyme to see if it doesn't break down. And you're like, okay, you know, but like when you're choosing a project at BioQuisitive, there's way more context. And it's like, oh, this problem I'm really passionate about. It's like, all right, well, so there's that why that, you always start with, and then you kind of go down. And then not everybody wants to do their own project. I think what we were worried about, to your point, Ava, like, what if everybody wanted to do their own project? How do you manage that? And the reality is, most people don't want to run their own project. They want to jump into a project and they want to work with other people in a team. They don't want to manage yet. But that happens over time, is what we've seen, is that they get to a point where they're ready to, or they become passionate about the project and they want to keep it going. And so you can give them more responsibility and then they start managing the space and managing the community on those nights.
And are these people who eventually become like employees, or it's all volunteers, or it's
All volunteer
academics,
based.
or?
Yeah, at the moment it's all volunteer based. At one point, it would be great to pay a full-time facilitator, someone that can, take this in their own unique direction. I think this space would benefit greatly from that. So that might be it could be a one FTE or one full-time equivalent, or it could be, two 0.5s or something like that, so that there's two people helping each other out. But that would be the dream, I think, is what we're trying to work to now is to get that grant support either from the Department of Education, local philanthropic foundations, that are committed to improving outcomes in STEM, for groups, different minority groups. That's the other thing, minority groups. We have a number of people, around APAC that will move here with these insane qualifications. And just because they're not a native English speaker when they get here, they just don't get the time of day. Like I remember one girl, Pratibha, walked into collabs and just showed up. Didn't, she was like, I told me the situation. I'm like, oh, I feel kind of bad. I was like, look, you should go to these different networks, go to these different community people, talk to people. You need to build your contacts out. This is how I would start. And then she came back and she's like, I did all that. And they basically told me I don't have any experience. I'm like, all right, well, let's just get you into the lab and doing something. So I think there's an opportunity as well for people to, like, especially immigrants that have, they're more qualified than me in so many ways, to be doing this, but they just need on their CV to make it look like, they have some experience here.
And you just mentioned collabs. Do you want to just
Oh,
quickly
yeah.
explain? Because I think I'm always like the labs and like what's going on. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain things?
Labs everywhere. So BioQuisitive, back in 2016, we were in a shipping container and a group had come out to us randomly, like one of these accelerator members. Are you familiar with the accelerators? Or, I mean, they're like programs to basically take an idea and accelerate it towards some sort of closer to a commercial outcome. This group had gotten some funding and they were growing this parasitic mushroom on widgety grubs, which is a delicacy in the East. So I was like, that's pretty nuts, cool. And so but that was like a light bulb moment. I was like, well, why here? Like we're in a shipping container lab now. We've upgraded from steampunk to shipping container. So we actually had a bit of support from the dean of science at the time, who was like, this is cool. Here's some money. And I'm like, yes. But that was a light bulb moment for us where it was like, oh, wow, people actually want to use the lab. Like commercial entities want to use this lab. I hadn't thought of this. So we put this rent the lab ad on Google and started getting hit up like a lot by people from overseas that had 15-person teams. They wanted to move to Australia. I'm like, you realize it's a shipping container. Like, it's not going to fit 15 people in here. But yeah, we just sort of at that point really started to question, well, how does that work? What's the norm, when it comes to renting and acquiring lab space for, like this is proper science. These people are paying a lot of money. They've been given a lot of money comparatively to what we've been doing. And like, surely there's a place for them to go. And it's like, actually, no, that accessibility problem does extend beyond just, education and personal curiosity and interest in projects, but also into the commercial space. So I was like blown away. I reached out to the state government. I'm like, we need to have a meeting. This is not acceptable, like what's going on here? Like, I want answers. And so they're like, oh, you should come to this other meeting. And so I went to this other meeting there was some big players, biolabs. They're like the world's premier innovation, what do you call them? Infrastructure, open, like just lab space for rent. Like, but it's not just lab space for rent. They package in everything. They give you equipment, they give you support, community network. And I'm like, these guys, we should bring them here. And they came. So there was actually a meeting happening literally a few weeks later. And I was invited to that meeting and pitched the shipping container concept. I think I was the fluffer guy. Right before Biolabs pitched their multinational thing. So like everybody kind of laughed at me again and was like, well, how are you going to take the shipping container lab and turn it into blah? I'm like, well, if we got some funding, we could blah, do it. Anyway, unfortunately, Biolabs fell through. They just they couldn't find alignment with the universities here because they really wanted to work with a host. State government was like, you know, that's all right. Well, we need to get something happening here. So they took a chance on us. We pitched to the minister, and they gave us $300,000, which, in the scheme of things, I was like, holy, like $300,000 coming out. I was selling sausages last week, and then suddenly like that, and then I was like, oh, I could build 10 labs, but no, we put it into one lab. Actually, two. We built two labs and like two full separate labs, as well as a really nice office space, which is what we're shooting in now.
Yeah, that's where we are.
But, I think that the real value actually came from the community, and like that whole history of like BioQuisitive and like just being frugal as hell, with every dollar that we had in the lab, just being as frugal and like cheap as you could be. But then also understanding, all right, we had to start moving into more, all right, we have to spend this money. We have to get this other nice thing. It's going to really help. So it was, yeah, that's kind of where collabs came from, was this like light bulb moment of, oh, wow, there's actually no one supporting startups and innovation down here the way that they need support. Everything was, I think, is traditionally, and even to today, it's still the case. We know that founders that are not, startups that are not coming out of university get looked at very, like the VCs get it, but there's a lot of funds here that are like, what do you mean you're a founder that's not associated with university? Like, what? So there's still, I think we're behind the times here and catching up to the rest. But I think from what I've seen with like just the last few years here, being in this sort of innovation space, it's been amazing. Like the talent is here. And the other great thing is there's experience coming back into the ecosystem, like people doing really well, going to the US, going overseas, and they're not staying, they're coming back and bringing that experience and mentorship towards upcoming founders. So anyway, I went on a whole different tangent there.
So Collabs is
a biotech co-working space, or as like we like to call it, a transdisciplinary innovation space. So imagine a BioQuisitive or community science lab for commercial people that want to actually solve a problem. Because the reality is, in this day and age, like to solve a problem, you need sustainability, and that's either coming from an exchange of value. Someone's paying you to solve that problem, or someone's paying you to solve that problem. And that's happening either by interfacing with customers, or the government is subsidizing it and saying like, we need you to solve this problem. So yeah, we help those people out now, as well as the students. And it's actually this really amazing ecosystem that we've created, where you have like at the bottom grassroots level BioQuisitive still today, and you have these passionate students coming in, like Beth's seen in the last few weeks. Like those become really good candidates for jobs, because you get a sense like they're getting that teamwork. They're getting they call them soft skills, but like they're essential. Like that you're building up their confidence in that agency. They're also, I think when a lot of people get a job, it's like, this is my job description. I do what's in my job description. I'm not, it doesn't say take the bins out, or it doesn't say this, but being in that community lab environment, everybody's the same level. Everybody's helping out, and you support that. And those are the people you want on the team, in a business, especially a uncertain business like a startup, where it's just a whole lot of unknown, it could be quite stressful. So people that know how to deal in those environments, especially around failure, really, really important to have on the team.
the two students we have at the moment. We're trying to run this gel, and each week something goes terribly wrong, and we're just like learning to laugh about it. What have we learned from this? And it's like they're doing so well. And it's like so nice to see, and that kind of resilience, and like, oh, we'll just try again, and this is still fun. And
Well, they have good mentorship, because if you just threw them in the deep end, you didn't have someone else to come up with ideas. But I think, what they're learning from you is that there's always another, like that pivot is so important, to say, it's okay, cool, we'll just try this next week. And that's okay.
yeah, it's all okay.
Yeah, I feel like that is really important, and something that in academia, if you're purely in academia, it's hard to internalize that, because when you fail, it's like, oh my God, I've wasted so much time. And I feel like because it's wrapped up in like your career, and probably also some monetary incentives at the end of the day, and everyone feels that their time is so limited, it quickly becomes not really about the science anymore, unless you get super lucky and you all your projects work out. But I feel that a lot of people are very stressed about all their projects failing. And I've had so many projects fail, and I don't think I've done the best at like being okay with them. It's a lesson that you learn, but it's not as comfortable as like being in a space where everyone's just excited about the science, because it a lot of the times it feels like people aren't even excited about the science when you're in academia, because it's about all these other things. So
It's a job. Yeah, it's very different. And that's the nice thing about like what I do today is like I look after everyone, but I'm not the one in the lab doing their work. So there is that like I can be excited for them in a lot of cases. I still hustle for science equipment today. So, someone's like, and that's the cool thing about being at collabs is someone will need something. It's like, oh, does anybody have this? Like, oh, I think I've now become John. I just realized the guy with the snacks and
The
the silicon.
yeah,
Yeah.
the silicon guy.
So I have a back room now filled with stuff, and that's like, oh, we'll just go to Andrew's storage area. There's probably something in there, and there generally is. But
wow.
yeah, I love that about this job.
And
Wow.
as someone who's watching it, I just want to say Andrew is amazing because like from the new lab we have at BioQuisitive now, it was just like an empty room. Now it's like filled with all this amazing lab equipment and it just like keeps growing and everyone yeah, watching it has just been amazing and it's like changed my whole life in Melbourne. Don't you think, Ava?
Yeah, I think you've definitely expanded Beth's vision of like what could be possible, because I think that's I mean there's so many like limiting beliefs in academia and about, and I think because it's such a old institution and there's like all this like
Mm,
prestige but also kind of baggage of like this is the way
mm,
that things are, and like these like old academics telling you that this is how you're supposed to do things, and because it's such a hierarchical kind of practice the way that science works typically, I think these are things that most people don't even dare to imagine that you could do. And I feel like, yeah, since Beth has started working at collabs, I feel like she's been like, oh, I could do whatever I want. Like, and she's had these like terrible experiences at universities, which we all have with like the way that admin works and stuff. And it's like, oh, it doesn't
yeah,
have to be like that. Like a better world is possible, and like you actually did it, which most people
Yeah.
don't.
yeah. Well, it took a lot of team. It was a lot of teamwork there. It
How
wasn't
long
just
has
me.
it actually been? Like, when did you start just with
I think
the
it's been about 10 years since BioQuisitive started. So Collabs has been running it for about four. We had to pack, I mean, when COVID hit, we had to pack up BioQuisitive, which was really tough. But yeah, 10 years. So we incorporated back in 2014 and then built the first lab in 2015, got it PC1 certified with the Department of Health. I think once we moved into the shipping container and we moved around a few times. That's the great thing about shipping container lab is that you can literally move the whole lab, which is pretty cool. And then COVID packed up, and then I got some experience. So I got some experience teaching and educating because I had done some work with some people that were setting up a tech school, Monash Tech School. So their whole that was awesome because I got to learn how to work with kids. I wasn't able to really accommodate that at our shipping container lab, but now it's just being thrown in the Department of Education, schools coming in every day, classrooms every day, just managing the classroom, but also making it fun and engaging. And like that, at one point, I thought I was going to become a teacher.
Oh, it
Like
would be great.
I was like, this is awesome. Like, especially there's moments you like actually change someone's life.
Yeah.
Like some kid comes up to you and she's like, I thought I was going to be a reporter. I didn't know I could do this. And literally it's just from like following the protocol and like seeing the results, but they're the one that did it. And that like suddenly changes what they think they can do. And like, yeah, those moments you're just like, holy cow, like I want to do more of that. And then like you hear about how poorly teachers get treated in the work environment. And you're just like, yeah, like,
better off staying in your own lab?
or doing it your own way, right? Like, I think that's the thing when I keep learning this, but it's like if you don't like the way that system runs, you just create your own system that runs alongside or runs differently to that one and fills in the gaps. And if those gaps are painful enough for you, they're probably painful enough for other people as well, to the point that if they see that, they'll want to participate and engage. It doesn't mean compete. People always are like, "Oh, I hope we're not cutting your lunch," like in the like with collabs. I went to an event last night and, I was kind of interfacing with, I guess, some operators that were in a similar space. And they were like, I hope we're not cutting your lunch, running this here and not at collabs. And I'm like, no, like the more we do this, the more the ecosystem grows. And like, when that happens, like, there's no point. Why would you monopolize? If you can't even do that. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Like, these are people that we're talking about, right? Like the founders, like they're not companies, they're people. And people, like, it's all about touch points and growth, and that spreads. And so like, no, there's no competition there.
Another really amazing thing has been someone who's coming into this space is reminding like myself why we're in science. And everyone at Collabs and everyone at BioQ wants to make the world better. And it's been so like, I feel academia can get quite like doomer vibes, and it kind of, you lose that hope for the future. When I'm here, I'm like, we can make things better, and we should, and it's for the community, and it's just, that is amazing. And Andrew's saying all this, and it actually is, the values are really here. It's not just a spiel, like you feel it being in this community, and I think that's really special. And I wish that everyone could have access to something like that. I'll try not to cry.
No, that's a really good point. I think I think we will try. What we're creating is a blueprint, like this lab concept. So to the point, like, we're even the workshops we're going to package up, and like how to build the lab so that, maybe there's a document that we can give other people, other communities, to build their own community science lab. And then if they need the training to run the workshops, to get the funds, because that's the other thing, how do you keep the lights on? We want to help this grow, and we want to help people feel like they can take action in their own lives and solve some of these big problems that might be giving them that sort of vibe, about the future.
And before we finish, do you want to end by, if there's any listeners who want to get involved in something like this, if they're at uni, high school, or any age, like, what advice would you have to someone?
Don't delay. Do it now. Go to Google, you can type in BioQuisitive, how to build a lab.
The Reddit thread?
The Reddit thread. But you can look us up online, so BioQuisitive or www.bioq.org.au, and just send us a message. It's not just me. We have an amazing board now as well. So some of my closest friends are on there, just super overqualified. Like the team is insane right now. And so, yeah, like it's never been a better time to get involved and to learn about this space.
Our intro and outro music is Nobody Stayed for the DJ by Glacio. Our transition music is Back for More, also by Glacio. Minds Matter is mixed, edited, and created by Beth Fisher, she's the Australian one, and me, Ava Madasuza. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode, but in the meantime, find all our episodes and show notes on mindsmatterpodcast.com.